It was the showdown of showdowns in week 3 of the Diddy trial. Kid Cudi, far and away the witness prosecutors are counting on to nail Diddy on racketeering charges. He took the stand Thursday, and his testimony, explosive.
Cudi says that Diddy broke into his house and lit his car on fire.
This week's testimony was lurid for sure, and confusing, especially when the Punisher testified about freakoffs with Cassie and Diddy. I was confused why prosecutors called you.
I was actually confused myself.
And there was dramatic testimony about Diddy gunning for Suge Knight.
If you'd have confronted me and he had a gun, you best believe he was going to have to use it.
Diddy took a hit when Cassie's mom testified. He straight up blackmailed her. But the defense scored big when Danity Kane singer Dawn Richard fell apart on the stand.
Diddy's defense lawyers ate Dawn Richard's lunch when she was on the witness stand, accusing her of changing her testimony often.
This is TMZ presents United States versus Sean Combs inside the Diddy trial. And welcome. It was a mixed bag in this trial this week. The defense scored some big points, I think, but I think the prosecution did too. We're going to break it all down. We're going to have a couple of guests. We're going to have one guest who testified, and it's unclear why the prosecution would want him. And there is somebody else I spoke with, and it's unclear to me why the prosecution didn't want this person, because this person could be key in proving racketeering. So we're going to get into all of that. Let's introduce our guest, Nancy Grace, who is the host of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. Joe Tacopina, the celebrity lawyer, most recently won the A$AP Rocky criminal case in Los Angeles. We have Ebony K. Williams, host of Equal Justice and Holding Court, and Ashley Banfield, host of Banfield on News Nation, and the host of Drop Dead Serious podcast. So I want to start with Kid Cudi. Let me kind of set the stage here. So Kid Cudi was dating Cassie after Cassie broke up with Diddy. And when Diddy found out, according to Kid Cudi, he got a phone call saying, "You better come over to your house because it's just been burglarized by one Sean Diddy Combs and an associate." And apparently Diddy had gone inside and found some Chanel bags or Chanel presents. It was around Christmas time. So it seems to me he was interested in finding out what Cudi was getting Cassie for Christmas. And then there was going to be a confrontation. Cudi decided, no, I'm not going to go over there because who knows whether Diddy is armed. So he files a police report. 12 days later, his car gets torched with a Molotov cocktail. And he believes it was Diddy who ordered that. So I want to start with this because there's more to it. But when you look at this, is it proof of racketeering, criminal conduct involving arson, guns, burglary, or is it a jealous, crazed criminal boyfriend?
Well, you know, you left out a lot of very damning facts. Now, either Sean Combs, a.k.a. Diddy, is clairvoyant or he's a car bomber. Have you ever handled a Molotov cocktail case? Because I have. They are extremely unpredictable, and I, having covered and prosecuted and investigated arson cases, can say without a doubt, dying by fire, not smoke inhalation, fire, burning to death, is the worst way to die. Now, think about it. 1 month, less than 1 month before Kid Cudi's car blew up, there you see it, that was from a Molotov cocktail, Sean Combs said, "I'm going to blow up Cudi's car." Okay. Then, amazingly, bam! 1 month later, his car is blown up with a Molotov. The significance, A, obviously, he masterminded it, unless he's clairvoyant, and I can't wait for Yorgos to try to claim that in court. But we've seen this before. For instance, in the Scott Peterson case, Scott Peterson says, "This is going to be my first Christmas without my wife. She died." And bam, 2 weeks later, it was his first Christmas without his wife. She died because he killed her. Or O.J. Simpson has a clairvoyant dream that he killed Nicole because he did. Same thing here. Now, regarding the Molotov, why Kid Cudi? Because it goes to prove criminal enterprise. You think Diddy ran down to the quick stop and got his Coke bottle full of accelerant gasoline? No, he had somebody else do it.
What's the enterprise?
That
Is the
aiding and
enterprise?
abetting a criminal enterprise.
What's
that
the
makes
enterprise?
It a crazy, jealous boyfriend. That's what it makes it. This guy is a crazy, look, proven in this case, Diddy's a criminal. Proven in this case, Diddy's a bad guy. Proven in this case, he's a batterer, an abuser, and despicable. Proven. That is not racketeering. That's not RICO. This is not a RICO act. This is a jealous, crazed boyfriend. That doesn't make it a racketeering act. If that were the predicate for racketeering, a racketeering criminal enterprise, because a criminal enterprise for racketeering purposes has to be an enterprise that's established to commit crimes. This guy became a lunatic because he was jealous of his girlfriend dating somebody else, and he did some horrific things. Let's assume I'm sure he did bomb the car, right? And I'm sure he broke into the house and did all that stuff. That's a jealous boyfriend going off the rails. That's not RICO. That is not RICO in any way, shape, or form.
You know what, though? It is RICO if you get your staff members to do it, and the DNA on the Molotov cocktail incident showed it was a woman, and yet they have not been able to prove it that it is a felony.
Okay,
how about this, Joe? How about this? That break-in at Kid Cudi's house, Capricorn Clark, who was his assistant, was shoved in. She testified, she's going to testify, that she shoved into a car and ordered to go there to that break-in. And she's so worried about this break-in, she's calling Kid Cudi to say, oh, God, Diddy's in your house. And there's another staff assistant who's involved with that as well. That is RICO. When you use your enterprise and your staff to order your staff to carry out crimes, that's RICO.
Not racketeering.
You look kind of crazy,
another person who's joining in this criminal enterprise.
Dial it down. You know what, Tacopina? You have officially joined the itty bitty Diddy committee. I think you know what I'm talking about. This isn't just a Tootsie Roll. This is a Tootsie Roll midgie. And I'm gonna send this to you. Congratulations.
That's a low blow, Nancy. Come on.
And Joe, you know what, Harvey, let me just also add this fact. What about the fact that what Sean Combs did, like you said, he probably did blow up the car with the Molotov cocktail. He probably did break into the house. And we're forgetting about the dog, by the way, that he actually terrorized the poor dog, locked the dog in the bathroom. Horrible, horrible. And we know that's that psychological warfare that we keep hearing about with Sean Diddy Combs in this trial, trying to show there is nowhere and nobody I can't touch to get to you if I want to show my influence, control, and domain. But here's the thing, Joe. What about the fact that I believe, and this is what the prosecution is certainly arguing, that all of this was done not only because he's crazy and jealous, that is true, but also to keep Cassie from leaving him. That is where now we're broaching the coercive, controlling nature of what the prosecution is putting under the RICO count in the original indictment.
But Ebony, but the problem with hold on. The problem with that is, according to Kid Cudi's testimony, Cassie was actually playing Diddy and Cudi by saying she was dating both. Hold on, though. I want to.
She's the one beaten to smithereens, and she's the bad guy.
Kid Cudi also made her a liar to that jury.
So I want to read to you. I want to read and show you some of the things that were seized at Diddy's Miami mansion on Star Island during the raid. And again, going to RICO, guns, I get it, guns and magazines. But we're talking drugs, okay. But what about baby oil, Astroglide, sex toys, high heels? Isn't the prosecution just throwing in the kitchen sink and in doing so diluting maybe the core of what they've got? I mean, the jurors are looking at Astroglide and high heels?
No, it's where was the Astroglide and the high heels? It is within a few feet.
You're explaining away every felony.
This is not a record. He's not charged with drug dealing.
Hold on.
The media has gone bananas over the sexy aspects of this, but the prosecution was very specific about this. Within feet of all the things that you need for the Freakoffs that have been proven in a pattern everywhere else, the Astroglide, the baby oil, the high heels, and the ropes, and no one even mentioned the ropes and the handcuffs. Within feet of those products were 2 illegal AKs with the serial numbers scratched out. And the prosecution
the magazines,
said
not the guns.
Serial
the
numbers
magazines
were not scratched out.
They were
serial
scratched out in the magazines.
Out on 2 AKs found at that house, according
on the magazines, not on the guns.
All right. Testified in that trial by the agent was that 2 AKs were found in that house and in the guest house. And they are saying that the proximity of those weapons to those sexual toys means that they easily were used in the coercive nature of the Freakoffs. And I think that's a powerful argument.
They didn't have Freakoffs in Miami. They were stored together. That doesn't make it a racketeering act. Are you, come on, really? Because they were stored next to each other, that means they were part of a RICO act together?
Well,
They
and
were
also,
used hand in hand?
but also, Ashley, my understanding is these Freakoffs occurred not at his home.
Not at
it
his
occurred
home.
at hotels.
Right,
I think that they
hotels.
were happening
They didn't have a
everywhere
Freakoff
because
in the Miami
they
home,
showed
Ashley.
they showed
So they were in
that the
close
master
proximity in a place
bathroom
where you
was
never had a
stocked.
Freakoff.
They showed the master bathroom was stocked just like every other hotel room with all of those implements, the candles and the
But you just
lipstick
said,
and
Ashley,
the heels
that
and the
close
Astroglide
proximity
and
in
the
his
baby
home
oil.
of the guns and the baby oil.
Joe
showed
Tacopina,
he
how
was
many bottles of
using it as a
baby oil
coercive
do you have
method.
in your
He
bathroom?
didn't have a Freakoff
I have
there.
one and it's lasted 15 years. Honestly, actually 20 because my kid's 20 years old. So I'm telling you, if you have 20 bottles of baby oil and 20 bottles of Astroglide in your closet, it ain't being used for just regular use.
Okay.
Listen, Ashley, I love your proximity argument, and I actually think it's very nuanced and quite brilliant. The issue is, to Harvey's point of kind of throwing so much at the jury, are they going to, and not to disrespect them in any way, the jurors, but are they, I think it's a tall order to ask the jurors to parse out and keep their eye on so many moving pieces of evidence versus having them focus on what kind of feels more like traditional RICO, the guns, the weapons, the drugs, things of this nature. I think it's so easy to get distracted by the salacious nature of the 7-inch heels and the Astroglide.
You know, unless you tell that jury, you know what, folks, I'm sorry you've been, you know, bombarded with a parade of these awfuls and parade of these horribles, but it is our job as prosecutors to prove a pattern. And sadly, in the case of Diddy, that's what this shows. Every single place he went, every single place he was,
So,
there were patterns of behavior.
Nancy, I've been waiting all week to be able to talk to you about one of the witnesses. His name is Sheree Hayes, and he is known as the Punisher, who was a male exotic dancer who first met Cassie and Diddy at the Trump International Hotel in New York. He went over there presumably for a birthday party that Diddy was having for just Cassie in the hotel room, ended up having sex with Cassie. It lasted for 3 years, 5 or 6 times a year. And what he testified to were the liaisons, but he didn't talk about any kind of force or coercion. I want to bring him in right now. Sheree, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm confused, based on your testimony, why prosecutors called you, because you're from Brooklyn and you did everything in New York, so there's no interstate commerce. And I didn't hear anything you testified about regarding force or coercion. Do you know why they called you? Did they tell you?
They did not. I was actually confused myself. I was contacted first by investigators, even before any charges, somewhere around March to May of 2024. And when they first approached me, my thought process was, "Hey guys, I don't have anything for you." I understood they were Homeland Security. It was specifically human trafficking, and it was clear. I said, "Hey, look, everything was all in the same state. I didn't see any violence, any aggression, anything that would constitute that I believe was a crime." So, you know, I was actually surprised when I was called to testify because I didn't see where my testimony would be significant to the case.
Did you ever ask prosecutors, or did they tell you what your purpose was? Did they coach you? I'm trying to understand this.
I mean, I didn't ask questions. You know, it was stress that, listen, just tell the truth, recall as much information as you can, just in an honest manner. And all of my questions and testimony and even the preparation for the trial was similar to my actual testimony on the stand. So I wasn't sure what it was going to connect to in regards to the case they were trying to prove. But I'm really unaware. I'm lost myself.
Nancy, you are such an effective prosecutor, and I'm having trouble with this one. He seems like an earnest guy. He testified. I don't see how this helped them at all.
Well, the fact that you do not understand the charges has nothing to do with him being a truthful witness on the stand. He is being charged, Sean Combs is being charged with a myriad of charges, and one includes transportation to engage in prostitution. Sir, may I ask you, were you not paid for sex acts? That's prostitution, right?
Yeah, but the interstate
yes,
transportation part is missing. The interstate transportation part, the Mann Act, requires interstate transportation. He was in state. He just said that. He was in state. He didn't leave state. He didn't come from New Jersey.
As I was trying to say before you so rudely interrupted, I know it's like throwing holy water on a possessed demon. Every time I start explaining the law, Tacopina goes crazy. It kind of got a crazy look in his eye too. But the point is, the Punisher, Sheree Hayes, is part of a pattern of bringing in sex workers to be paid to perform illicit activities. He's part of a bigger picture. The fact that he wasn't flown in from Vegas means nothing. He's one of many proving this case. It's very plain. Sex, see, that's what you do. When I beat you on one argument, you fall back. RICO. Well, I can beat you on that argument too, and so can the feds.
It's not the Mann Act. You're talking about the Mann Act. You're talking about transportation of sex workers, bringing in sex workers for prostitution.
I'm not talking about the Mann Act. I'm talking about the indictment. Which states?
Which count?
Transporting prostitutes.
Which count?
Third count.
There are multiple counts of this, and there are other sex workers that were flown in, and there's testimony of that.
The Mann Act doesn't apply here.
Yes.
Nancy, do you agree?
No, not the Mann Act. This is not a Mann Act case, as you accurately pointed out.
It's not the Mann Act case.
But the indictment, again, charges bringing in sex workers. He's a sex worker, and he's brought... You're talking gibberish. And another thing I don't understand about this panel is that you're all saying, yeah, he firebombed Kid Cudi's car. And you're acting like it's nothing.
It is a Mann Act case.
The indictment lays out arson as one of the predicate acts.
Here's the things. Sheree has had a stressful enough week. I don't want to heap that on you. So really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
So Ashley and Ebony, I think one of the most effective things the prosecutors did this week was call Dawn Hughes to the stand. She is a forensic psychologist who talked essentially about Stockholm Syndrome and that there are reasons that women don't leave relationships that are abusive and when the power dynamic is out of whack. And she seemed very effective when it came to trying to kind of blow up this notion that because Cassie stayed for 11 years, that she consented to everything. It seemed like that had an impact.
Yeah, let me tie Sheree Hayes, who we just talked to Dr. Hughes, because I believe that Sheree Hayes not only proved Nancy's point of pattern, maybe not the sex trafficking because he was local, but it's a pattern of behavior. It corroborated all the descriptions that Cassie gave on the stand. And there's Dr. Hughes to come right afterwards to say, you know, the coercion doesn't always look like it does in the movies. Sometimes, you know, this kind of behavior is so much more nuanced. When you are a victim of coercive behavior, if you're an abused wife, girlfriend, husband, you go along with things and you smile to make things better. And Sheree Hayes, the Punisher, said, it didn't look like coercion to me. I was in there doing my prostitution business and everything seemed fine. And there was Dr. Hughes to explain why. I thought it was very, very effective because a lot of people on that jury may not understand domestic violence and they do need a doctor. They do need an expert to explain why somebody would keep going back to that husband who just keeps beating you, keep going back to that boyfriend who just keeps beating you. And that was an incredibly well and articulated argument for why Cassie might go on like this for 11 years.
And Nancy Grace mentions clairvoyance, which is so perfect. It's so perfect, right, Harvey? Because what was it just last week on this very show? We discussed this. Nancy and I talked about how the Stockholm Syndrome of it all could affect a victim's not feeling free to leave, not feeling that she had autonomy over whether she stays or goes, and feeling the shame and guilt around that, right? Well, on this very show just last week, we talked about how much the prosecution had to make the case. They couldn't leave the jurors to figure it out. They needed to put just exactly this type of expert witness, this type of clinical forensic psychologist who specializes in physical and sexual abuse to help the jurors, as Ashley pointed out, who are not necessarily experts on these dynamics, understand how they work at a microscopic level. And I think that this was the most brilliant thing the prosecution has done actually so far to make it plain.
Harvey, she's right. Remember last week she had on her pink outfit and she was going to go raise awareness for battered women?
Yep.
And
Thank you,
I
Nancy.
recall that when I was volunteering at the Battered Women's Center, that they had to train me and train me and train me not to say on the hotline, why don't you leave? Because it's not like that. It's not that simple. And to all of us, we think, well, just leave. But the women feel they can't leave. And if you don't believe them, take a look at that big gash on Cassie Ventura's forehead that she had to have
And look
plastic
what
surgery
happened.
on.
Look what happened when she did get another boyfriend.
Miss Ventura
Right?
took
Look what happened,
covered in
guys.
bruises.
Look what happened when Cassie got another boyfriend. She got a boyfriend named Kid Cudi, and everything started to happen to him too. And then sex tapes were threatened to be released of her and Kid Cudi. That's why you don't leave.
Joe, she was
Yeah,
she
you're
was a
terrified
power.
that exact
Joe,
pattern's
she
gonna
was a
happen.
powerful
Harvey,
witness. She was a
horrible,
powerful
over-the-top,
witness.
jealous boyfriend, horrific human being. And I agree with what Ashley just said. I think this witness does help the prosecutors bridge the gap between consent and coercion. I do. But the defense has to do something very important here. The defense has to remind the jury that she never treated the accusers in this case. They have to remind the jury that they never treated the accusers, she never treated the accusers, and her testimony is generalized and theoretical. And that the challenge is to prevent the jury from mistaking clinical analysis for actual proof of what happened in this case. That's going to be the challenge for the defense.
Okay,
it's a powerful witness. Don't get me wrong. But she never spoke to
And
anyone
Harvey,
here.
I've just about had it with you too. You keep
With
saying
me?
he's just a jealous boyfriend. That's saying like
I just told you I
the
thought this guy. I just
is
thought
just misunderstood.
I literally just said to you, I thought this was an incredibly powerful witness. As a matter of fact, our TMZ producer Brian Andrews was in the courtroom. How did the jury respond to Hughes?
Well, based on what I saw, Harvey, they started to zone out towards the end of it, especially when the defense went in and they said, hey, isn't it true that you're making $6,000 for being here today and you charge $600 an hour? And then the defense went into the fact that she was actually training other people how to be an expert witness, and that basically she was in the bag for the government, that she had been consulting the government on how they were going to file certain pleadings in the Diddy case. So by the time they were done with her, the good doctor kind of left with her head held high, but a lot of people were kind of like,
So all her analysis always falls on one side of the table. That's something that you point out to a jury, and a jury understands, hey, this is a hired gun for one side. It's that simple.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander, though. If the defense wants to bring any experts up there, the prosecution makes the very same argument. How much were you paid, Mr. Smith?
You're right.
So there was testimony. I can't wait to show you this. There was testimony that Diddy's assistant went to a place called Mel's Diner in the Sunset Strip and went inside and saw Suge Knight there. And Suge Knight was an arch enemy of Diddy. You know, one is Bad Boy Records, one is Death Row Records, and they had real beef. It was a war. When Diddy found out, when the assistant came home, Diddy told the assistant, jump in the car. Diddy took 3 guns, put him in the car, and went to Mel's Diner to find Suge Knight. Suge had left by then, okay? So nothing happened. But about an hour ago, I talked to Suge Knight, who is in prison for something unrelated. And I asked him about it. And when you listen to this, I think he would have been a star witness for the prosecution when it comes to proving racketeering. Here's a little bit of my conversation.
The prosecution made it appear that Diddy was going to confront you in a very ominous way with 3 guns in the car when he went back to Mel's Diner. Did you guys have serious beef to the point where he might have used those guns, do you think?
If he'd have confronted me and he had a gun, you best believe he was going to have to use it, or something was going to happen. If he had 3 guns, it really was something was going to happen.
Had the disputes between the two of you escalated to the point where there could have been violence?
When you're dealing with drugs and alcohol and even fear, some people feel if they're scared enough, they feel they got to do something. They can't do it with their hands, so they got to make sure they bring guns.
Do people bring guns to use them or to protect themselves in a situation like this?
If you got the serial number, if the serial number's shade off, you best believe they're supposed to be to use them.
Sure, can I ask, when you were at Mel's Diner that night, were you armed?
Harvey, you know I will always tell you, I'm in prison, I probably was armed with my Bible. Other words, you know I ain't going to answer that question, Harvey.
Fair. That's fair.
Guys, I got to tell you,
wow.
If you want to get to racketeering and you see
Harvey
Diddy, well, I'm sorry,
Nope.
but Diddy is going to confront this guy with 3 guns?
That's not racketeering. It has to be a predicate act in furtherance. Racketeering. Rick, listen, it has to be a predicate act in furtherance of the conspiracy. What is the conspiracy with regard to Suge Knight?
You mean like car bombing?
Sex trafficking?
Joe,
Sex trafficking? No.
There's a man named David James.
In furtherance of the conspiracy. That's
you
what
want the
RICO
predicate
is.
act? I got you, predicate act, okay?
How is
David
that in furtherance
James
of the conspiracy?
Hold on,
Ready?
Joe.
David James is an assistant. He works for Bad Boy Records. He works for Diddy. Diddy he testified under oath this week. Diddy ordered him into that car and said the words, "Drive, MFer." And he had 3 guns in the car. And David James said he was so in fear for his life, he quit the job because of that night. They were headed to Suge Knight.
Right.
That, my friend, is using your staff, coercing them to work in furtherance of a crime.
Ashley, you don't understand RICO. That is not that is a bad act. That's a bad act. It's not
Every
an
time
act in
anybody
furtherance of the
disagrees with you, they
conspiracy.
don't understand
it has to be
the
an
law.
act in furtherance of the conspiracy. What act is that
You're
in
off the
furtherance of
rails,
the
man.
racketeering conspiracy?
Nancy, I have a
You've
feeling
got
I'm
an
with you
ag
on this.
assault, you've got an arson, you've got transporting
labor,
prostitutes. It's
coerced
everything
labor.
the state promised, and now they're delivering, and you are squirming, and you can't
Coerced
stand it.
squirming.
When
It's not the
Ashley was
state,
just
Nancy. It's the
explaining
United
that
States
to you,
government.
you were twisting and turning.
So, Ebony, hold on. Ebony.
Woo. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they call Suge Knight? To me, this is 2 record companies where you're basically
of a pipe cleaner.
I'm sorry.
He's a murderer.
Joe.
This would impact the jury.
Hold it, Joe. Hold it, Joe.
All right.
Harvey,
Sorry,
I
Ebony.
couldn't agree. Hey, listen. I could not agree with you more, and here's why. There's some major history here that is literally life and death. Let us go all back 20, 25 plus years to when Sean Combs was standing side by side essentially throughout the career of Biggie Smalls. And you know who was standing side by side of Suge Knight? The legendary Tupac Shakur. We know that both of those gentlemen ultimately lost their lives to tragic gun violence. And I think from a narrative standpoint, Harvey, of course, Sean Combs is not being charged with murder as a part of the RICO statute, the RICO count, but I think it broadens the lens to just how much scope could be at play with the level of impact, coercion, scheme, and pattern of Sean Combs. And I think that would have been very powerful for this jury to hear.
Okay. Cassie's mom testified this week, and I found this really interesting. To call Cassie's mom, which Diddy did, and essentially blackmail her. So this is the email that Cassie sent her mom. The threats that have been made toward me by Sean Puffy Combs are that he is going to release 2 explicit sex tapes of me, one on Christmas Day, maybe before or right after, and another one sometime soon thereafter that. She goes on to say, he has also said that he will be having someone hurt me and Scott Miscati, who is Kid Cudi, physically. So she ends up then getting a call, the mother, from Sean Combs. And Sean Combs demands $20,000 from the mother because Diddy supposedly loaned her the money. And the mother has to then mortgage the house to get the $20,000. Aside from thuggery, this seems to align with the notion that they were hanging these sex tapes over Cassie's head. He was. And at one point on an airplane, he made it explicit, do a freak-off or else I'm releasing them. I think this mother's testimony and the email is really damning for Diddy.
Yeah, the email's copied to the bookkeeper, by the way. The bookkeeper sends the wire instructions. So if you're looking for RICO, Joe Tacopina, when you use your bookkeeper to extort somebody for $20,000 within just a few days of sending that threat that you're going to release sex tapes. And when that mom gets on the stand and says, I was so fearful that my daughter was going to have sex tapes out, we mortgaged the house and we sent the $20,000. And there are receipts when you send a wire and you use your bookkeeper in Bad Boy Entertainment to actually ask for the money and send the wire instructions. I don't see how you get past that.
She may be right. I mean, listen, I'm not saying every argument that the prosecution's making false. That is a good argument. What Ashley just said is a good argument. You know, I would say the reason why Mark Agnifilo did not cross-examine her, and I think that was the right move, is because he basically said, I have no questions for you because you're her mother. You're supposed to corroborate her story. You're supposed to back her up. No, and no one would think you'd say anything otherwise.
That's not why he didn't ask her any questions.
Sure
Come on, Joe. He didn't ask her any questions. No, there's plenty of mothers
that will be the argument summation.
Sketch.
Ebony, that's why he didn't do it. I'm telling you.
She seemed credible. She seemed credible. She seemed believable. There were things that he could have asked her that he probably didn't know the answer to, which could have led him down a road that would have made it worse for his client. Listen, we've seen plenty of mamas be a hot-ass mess on the stand that are gifts to the defendant. So I think that she just happened to be an extraordinary witness. I will also ask you this, Joe, to Ashley's point she just made, which you rightly conceded was brilliant. Here's the thing, though. How do you go through that level of proof of the argument and then say, by the way, what Cassie was doing was voluntary? How do you play that flip-flop game?
Because you then have text messages from Cassie that say it was voluntary. You have Cassie setting up these freak-offs on her own, even without his direction. So there are things you have to balance that.
You don't think the jury, Joe, is going to say, well, she probably would have said anything, knowing that he could reach the very person put on the earth to protect her, which is her mother, and he proved that even the mother can't protect her.
That's one instance, though, Ebony. The jury could say that, but they also could say, come on, and sometimes she was maybe coerced, sometimes she wasn't. There's too much inconsistencies here.
How many times does she have to be coerced for it to be criminal?
But even one coercion equals sex trafficking, just one coercion. But I do agree with Tacopina on this. To have the mother up there on the stand, Regina Ventura, to cross-examine her after all this jury's already heard, that would make them turn against not only the defense lawyer, but against the client, Sean Combs, as well. That's a really good tactic not to tear apart the mother. They took out a line of credit on their home. They didn't have 20 grand because Sean Combs was extorting them. Another facet of criminal enterprise. It's getting one nail in the coffin after the next. That's just another one. And I think Kid Cudi and the mother, Miss Ventura, were the two strongest witnesses for the state.
Brian, what did the jury think about Regina Ventura?
I can only tell you what their faces registered. And it was a typical New York moment. You know, these New Yorkers have seen everything. Nothing phases them. They watched her walk in, and then they watched her walk out. It was very short. And what was very interesting was the whole issue of the 20 grand wire, because the defense pulled it out in the testimony that the money, days later, went right back into their account. So I think they felt bad for her, honestly. They looked at her with the glance you would give a woman whose child has just been on the witness stand for a couple of days talking about the most intimate, most horrible parts of her life. So I think they appreciated hearing from Mom, but I don't know if it swayed them one way or the other.
I want to button something up because it's true that Diddy put the money back into her account a short time later. I think that makes him look worse because what it shows is that he just wants to show, here's the power I have over you. I think it makes him look awful putting the money back that way.
He extorted the money regardless of what he did with it. He extorted them.
I still think she
And
looks
he did it,
worse.
Nancy. $20,000 to Sean Combs is $5 to us here on this panel, except for Harvey, who's a billionaire. But other than that, you know, here's the thing. Here's the thing. We know it was the psychological warfare piece, Nancy. It was never about $5 or $20,000. It was to prove I can make you do whatever I want you to do, and you can't do a damn thing about it.
And to prove it to Cassie, Ebony, because you go after her mother, she'll do anything. She'll do anything rather than see her parents suffering like Regina Ventura did.
So when Johnny and Amber were fighting each other in court, TikTok owned that story. They really did. And TikTok was where people got their news, and it was all opinion-based. But what was so interesting about it is that that people listened and they formed opinions based on TikTok. It is happening again with Diddy. This is an incredibly powerful platform. Smack the Messenger is a very popular person on TikTok who is following the trial. Smack is joining us. I'm wondering, from your vantage point, and especially with all the people who look at your platform and what you do, how are people receiving it so far?
So I do polls every day when I do my lives in the afternoon to kind of go over the court case during the day. And right now, the last one we did yesterday, it was 54% said he was guilty. And it was like 40-something% said that he wasn't. The rest of the people in my live said that they don't know yet. It's still 50-50. But honestly, in the lives on TikTok and from the people talking from the outside of the courtroom, we're more so arguing about is he charged with the right things. Honestly, a lot of people don't think that that RICO is the proper charge, and also the sex trafficking. With what you guys were just talking about, I honestly think that they are putting the nails in the coffin. I think it's just little by little, and I think that because we're outside of the case, we just know everything from the past, and we're so ready to get to the point. But for the most part, though, a lot of people are arguing over, are these the right charges?
RICO in particular?
RICO in particular, and also the sex trafficking, because it's a back and forth of, was Cassie truly involved with it, or was she a victim? It just depends on who you ask.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you said it's almost 50-50 when you put polls up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's called a hung jury if it's a jury.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
And, you know, in some ways, guys, a hung jury is a victory for the defense because then they get to see the prosecution's case.
It's so different in the courtroom than it is out in the headlines, guys. Honest to God, when you sit through these cases in the courtroom and you listen to every bit of testimony, and by the way, these jurors have nothing else to do but listen to what's happening in front of them all day long, then you get a very different picture. I can tell you from experience,
Ashley,
the days that I've been in court compared to the days I've just seen the headlines, people outside don't understand some of these verdicts sometimes.
Correct.
Casey Anthony, and I don't want to get Nancy started on Casey Anthony, but if you don't sit through the case and hear all of the evidence, you don't understand what the actual case and the actual evidence
Ashley, you're right.
to.
And the difference between a federal trial that is not televised and it's only reported, as opposed to the trial I just went through with A$AP Rocky in Los Angeles that was televised, and everyone got to see every witness and every question asked, and sit like a juror. If they really watched the whole trial, they were sitting like a juror. You get to actually analyze it. In federal court, there are no cameras, so there's no way you could assess if the case is going well for one side or the other unless you're sitting in that courtroom and watching every bit of testimony, not reading a two-paragraph analyzation by somebody.
I got to stop everybody because you're doing something really wrong. How many witnesses will it take that state she had knots on her head? I saw him drag her by her hair. I saw him hit her in the head with a frying pan, a hot frying pan full of eggs. It goes on and on and on, and we're still talking about you too, Smack. You too. Was she in on it? I mean, he hit her in the head with a frying pan.
So you hurled that at Smack. Smack, what's your response?
So with me, I try to stay neutral in this because I really like to let the courts do their job. These are the arguments that we have because I make it a safe space in my platform to let both sides talk. I don't even tell my opinion, but just like you're saying, Nancy, I understand that part. He was a horrible person in the relationship, and I agree with that. Everybody, I think, can agree with that. But like I said, the main argument at hand for the most part is it RICO and is it sex trafficking? And I feel like we shouldn't even be talking about that.
You also just said, did she go along with it? How many women is it going to take? How many more victims to say he beat me, he drugged me, I didn't go along with this, I didn't want this? What? They're all lying, and he is the only one telling the truth? That's BS.
At least respond to that, Smack. I mean, she's making a point that she's saying you're ignoring the evidence that there is time after time when she's been beaten, and you're being really insensitive to a situation that Nancy is saying is apparent.
I don't think I'm being insensitive. I think that, like I said, I'm going with what they have in the court so far. And yes, they have presented the fact that he was doing that to Cassie. I agree with that. I agree wholeheartedly.
You didn't hear
But
about that frying pan, man? Frying pan to the head? Insensitive, my rear end. That is hard evidence. A frying pan to the head. And you still think that she went along with it?
I understand that, but when you ask me a question, I gotta have time to answer.
Mac,
let me help you out. I agree with what you're saying as well. But like I said, the arguments that I have been hearing, because I don't put my own inputs in, they have been, okay, well, we know that he was a horrible person in a relationship, but what was Cassie's role in this? And to know who Sean Combs is and who Cassie is.
Let me help you, Smack. Let me help you, Smack. Here you go. So this is where the prosecution needs to bring in another expert of the caliber of Dr. Don Hughes to explain to Smack and his followers that, guess what? Oftentimes, Smack, victims of sex trafficking get roped into the execution of the trafficking. That is extraordinarily common.
In my live, Dr. Hughes was a horrible witness to the people who were in my live, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because when they started asking about Cassie's feelings toward what was happening in the relationship, how did she respond to Diddy? My followers didn't like the fact that she started talking about like taking your laptop away, as if she was prepared to incorporate what happened with Diddy with how she looked at the entire situation. They feel like she was coerced by the prosecution.
Okay.
What?
So, Smack, appreciate you.
That's what I'm saying. So it's a total different view on TikTok from what's going on outside or on.
I think I can summarize this.
And
I think I can summarize this.
I'm glad he said that because that's another thing that happened to Cassie. When she didn't do what Diddy said, he took her computer, he took her watch, he took her car, he took her phone, he kicked her out of the apartment. I mean, what more do you people need to be convinced that she was coerced?
Ashley?
Okay, I think the confusing thing for a lot of people, and I think Smack makes a really good point, his followers are half and half on this because they're not in court. And what's really interesting about this case is that RICO's complicated. They see a hotel video of Cassie getting beaten up and they say, this isn't domestic violence. That's not what's charged. And that's what Smack's followers are saying. I don't get it. What's this RICO business? He's beating her up and that's not RICO. Well, what Smack, I think what your followers need to know, and I think you could probably do a really good post on this, is that RICO has 37 different crimes under it. And let me just list out a couple of them because they really pertain to the evidence that we've been hearing. Assault, forced labor, bribery, distribution of a controlled substance, extortion, kidnapping, witness tampering, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. And so if the followers heard that there was a conspiracy kidnapping's in there. If the followers hear that there is an enterprise, because RICO requires an enterprise,
right, that's
like
the key,
Bad Boy
enterprise.
led by Diddy, who sends his employees out to help in all
Didn't
these
you guys
crimes,
see Sopranos,
and these crimes
for
are
Pete's
committed,
sake?
then
Smack?
you get RICO.
I'm not going to brag, but I was in Sopranos.
It's not that hard. Turn on HBO, watch Sopranos.
It's a lunatic.
Tony Soprano is the head of the snake.
And watch season 1, episode 2 as well.
People get murdered in the
two more points. Two more points.
Done.
Dawn Richard kind of got eviscerated on cross-examination. She is the member of Danity Kane. Brian,
everybody.
Brian, says Brian, come in. How did Dawn Richard do in the stand?
I was sitting there on the third row. Look, she walked in, stunning. She was ready for battle, and then she came back for her next day. And when Nicole Westmoreland from Team Diddy got up, as I've said before, she ate Dawn's lunch. This was the first time we had heard Westmoreland open her mouth in court. She was powerful. She was mighty. She was on the attack. She was all business, and she was going to town in very testy exchanges. Attack issue number 1 was the frying pan, because Dawn Richard had testified, Diddy hit her with the frying pan. But on October 31st of 24, when she was meeting with prosecutors, she told the prosecutors, I don't know if it was hitting. I think he attempted to hit her. And then Nicole Westmoreland went to town on that. And she said, well, I don't recall. Is it hard for you to keep your story the same? Asked Westmoreland. Well, I'm telling it to the best of my recollection, said Dawn. And then Nicole comes in. Well, you've had 4 different recollections. And this went on. And I'm watching the jury. And the ladies on one of the rows in the jury row are going like this. I mean, it was resonating. But it all kind of came to a head towards the end of the cross when Nicole was asking about the civil litigation that Cassie, right after Cassie had dropped her suit, Dawn Richard had dropped her suit. And the question was, hey, you should have gone to the cops. Why did you go to a civil attorney? And then it went on, and these are my notes. I can't wait to put these in a frame when I get back to Florida. But basically, it was, why were you suing? Well, I was hoping for justice, said Dawn. And then Nicole said, no, you were hoping for money. And then this is really good. Dawn says, well, I wanted to be made whole. I wanted to be compensated for the work that I did. This is according to the suit that she had filed. And then Nicole says, compensation means money, right?
Okay, well, look.
And Dawn says yes, and
Joe,
that was no more questions, Your Honor.
Joe, this was your point about money for months.
Yep. I mean, you know, you're a victim of a crime, especially a crime as horrific as this. Go to the police. You want justice? Go to the police. Get the perpetrator off the street. Get him arrested. You don't wait years and then go to a civil lawyer, a money lawyer, and just get money. That's not seeking justice. That's seeking money. And that was the distinction that was made at the end of this cross-examination. Certainly a fair line of inquiry. Happened also obviously with Cassie. No one went to the police. No one reported this to the police ever. But people went to get money.
We're not going to mention the fact that Cassie was barred from going to the police because of statute of limitations. And the only reason she was able to sue was because of a brand new piece of legislation called the Look Back Act here in New York City. We're just not going to talk about that,
No,
Joe?
that's a civil thing. That's a civil thing. Rape in New York there is no statute of limitations for that crime. She could have easily, today, if she wants, is a precinct right down the road there, next to the courthouse.
For the
You can go get him arrested.
because you know, as a brilliant, successful criminal defense lawyer, how very difficult it is if you don't have a rape kit, if you don't have DNA. That's a very high burden to meet. Very high, especially years after the fact, which is when she was able to speak on her trauma.
Okay, last thing. So one of the pieces of evidence that came in this week was a drug, ecstasy. And the prosecution made a point of saying that it had President Obama's face on it. Was this a cheap trick because Barack Obama is beloved in New York?
I don't even know if that's a good thing or bad thing.
A cheap trick by who? Sean Combs for having ecstasy in Obama's face shape? Or are you trying to say the state planted this? Sean Combs did that to himself. So if anybody's tricking anybody, it's him, not the prosecutors.
That's just color, but I'm going to tell you something about MDMA that matters to RICO, and this is for you, Joe, because I keep tying it all back to RICO. I'm excited by all the color in the courtroom, but I tie it all back.
He was asking about
we're going to talk about MDMA
face.
for a hot minute.
I bet she's going to talk about the assistant that had to go buy it.
Thank you very much. George Kaplan said that he was twice sent on missions. Call this number, get my dealer, go get the drugs, bring them back, bring them to me, here's the cash. And at one point, in one of those instances, he looked, hold it. He looked in the bag and he said it was ecstasy. In the other instance, he said he didn't look in the bag. But I think he closed the loop and became a drug trafficker in the enterprise of Bad Boys Diddy Records because the boss sent him as an assistant to go and drug traffic
He's
for
not
him.
trafficking drugs. There's no evidence that he sold drugs. Ashley, a drug trafficker doesn't buy drugs for themselves. They sell drugs. That's what trafficking is. Drug traffickers don't purchase drugs. That's a purchaser.
Sean Combs sent his assistant to buy drugs.
But that's a mule.
The assistant had to get immunity to testify about it. She's right. It happened in court. The accountant, the assistant, the other assistant. They're all
but Nancy, hold on. I think Joe's point is trafficking means putting it out, not buying it.
Buying it.
Unless I'm totally misunderstanding.
It was a crime to buy a controlled substance.
Right.
And he had his minion go do it. It's a criminal enterprise. Don't you
was handing it out like candy, Harvey. Come on.
Okay.
Like Flintstone vitamins.
Okay.
What are we talking about?
We are going to end on Barack Obama then. Listen, guys, thank you.
This
We.
is a 3-on-1.
That's a whole other story, which we're going to get into.
Can't take a Tacopina? You need your buddy?
First of all, call me Joe. I call you Nancy. Don't go Tacopina. I don't call you Grace.
No, that's a term of endearment, Joe. You have to understand.
Okay.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We are going to be on top of next week because this is where the prosecution is going to have to start tying all of this together into a story, a singular story, because right now there are pieces. Next week is where it's either going to come together or it's not, and those are high stakes. So thank you guys. We will see you next week.